completely support what the Animal Liberation Front does, you know, as far as rescuing animals from laboratories and from factory farms. The Animal Liberation Front, these people are my heroes that are risking their own freedom, you know, to save lives.
The guidelines were tactical in that we obviously didn't want anyone who was innocent to suffer from what we were doing. And certainly we didn't want animals to suffer from anything we did. So we had to be careful on sort of in that respect. And I think we wanted to create quite a large movement. We wanted a lot of people to take ALF action. So we had to have tactics that people in general felt happy with, so they could join in.
In the naive first formative years of those small people, they did set up an office, you know, and they did have Animal Liberation Front literature, and you were able to contact them. But it wasn't long before the police totally shut that down. And ever since then, ever since those small group of people disbanded, now there's a global Animal Liberation Front that you read about in all your papers, but there is no structure to it. There is no organisation, there's no one you can write to, please come and help me, you know, there's a goat locked up in someone's yard. No, you have to do it yourself.
The Animal Liberation Front is not an organization. The Animal Liberation Front is anybody that takes action to help animals, despite that action being classified as illegal in this day and time.
The reason that masks are worn is simply because the activists are smart enough to know that they need to live to fight another day. They don't want to be recognized by law enforcement. They don't want to be recognized on the news and by people at work. They want to be able to continue their work in the movement.
The Animal Liberation Front is the modern day underground railroad. Just like Harriet Tubman, the ALF goes in, they get animals out of labs, and they put them through literally an underground railroad for animals, getting them safe vets to check them out and safe homes for them to spend their lives in.
And that means that they must not take any credit as people for their rescues. They must remain anonymous. My belief is that they're willing to serve time, that they will put their personal freedom on the line if they need to, but they're not foolish enough to just do it willy-nilly and make themselves targets.
I think that someday soon I hope, the ALF will be represented to be the forces that they really are.
To be freedom fighters.
I don't consider myself to be anything special. I don't think anybody involved with the ALF is. All I want to do is avoid cruelty, and I think most people are the same.
It's in there at the same time. It does exist in people's hearts and people's minds, but as an organisation, it can never exist and it never will exist. If it did exist, the police and the FBI would bust it up, you know? And that's why they're so frustrated, because they can't stop the Animal Liberation Front, because they can't get their hands on it, you know? And there is no office, there is no structure. It's in here.
It wasn't so much the companion animals that we had that inspired me to get involved in campaigning against cruelty. It was the cruelties. The huge animal abuse that's been taking place, you know, in the slaughterhouses, the factory farms and laboratories. That's what's incited me, that's what's encouraged me to get involved in animal abuse. And I suppose because I know that, you know, every animal is an individual and that, you know, they've got a right to a life and to be free from pain and suffering. It's not so much the consequences of my actions that cause me problems, that make me fear. It's not doing anything. If I didn't do anything to help these animals out, you know, that's what would keep me awake at night.
Oh my God!
I was quite offended by the cruelty. I was offended that that's how I'd been brought up. You know, to believe that it was all nice and cosy when in fact it wasn't. You know, the reality is something very different. I've written many letters to MPs and got nowhere with them. And we all try, we all desperately want to change the world legitimately, legally, but it just doesn't work like that. The people that run the country, they have shares, they have investments in pharmaceutical companies, for example, who are experimenting on animals. So to think that you can write to these people and say, look, we don't like what you're doing, we'd like you to change, and expect them to do so, you know, it's not going to happen. Yeah, I've just had a copy of the video from the farm. Awful. I've spoken to Trading Standards today. They're just not interested. They've been there. They said they've given the place a clean bill of health. Basically, they don't think there's anything wrong. There's nothing illegal. They said to me it's a trade-off if we want cheap eggs. That's their attitude. Same with the RSPCA. They're just not interested. Now, the advice I've got is that there are a lot of laws being broken here, but these people just don't care. So I think we need to get together and sit down and have a talk about where we're going to go next with this. We've seen what actions have been effective in this country over years to highlight issues of animal cruelty and to bring an end to animal cruelty issues. And it's the direct action that's working constantly. It's taking control, it's taking some personal action to make a difference. For example, rescuing an animal that's kept in a cage.
The activity here, especially on the West Coast, was a little bit modeled after the UK.
Animal rights protesters have broken into another research unit controlled by Oxford University.
I was acting as a liaison between the underground and the above ground. You know, people ask me a lot of times,